So we know from corporate media that unfortunately the military, the industrial complex, the bloodshed, the tyranny all gets featured on mainstream media. Why? Because war sells to them. They make profits off it. Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon can advertise on those networks to stop investigations, to stop from journalists from actually investigating. And people watch and fearmonger, and they get brainwashed and they get propagandized to believe that there's one crazy boogeyman and somehow we're the good guys, even though we're the ones infiltrating the most evil in the world. And this has been going on for decades. And we're continuing to see this continuously with what's happening with Ukraine, what's happening with Russia, what's happening with now with Taiwan and China. They did 60 Minutes with Joe Biden, where Joe Biden announced that they're going to take action with Taiwan. Utterly ridiculous that we're even mentioning that, but now they're just going to lead to another country for war because war is a business to them. And what better business opportunity than people that we can, manipulate and say that you feel oppressed and you need to liberate yourself and you need to go against the evil, corrupted China, even though that's really our enemy. But somehow we're going to train Taiwan to think that they're the enemy and yada, yada, yada. You get the picture. And throughout this period, we know that anti-war voices don't get appeared on mainstream media for that reason. That's why people like Phil Donahue was fired, Ashley Banfield, Jesse Ventura, other great legends had made it on mainstream media. You don't see Glenn Greenwald appearing on any of the networks anymore. Dylan Ratigan, any of those anti-war prominent voices don't get featured on there because, again, it's a business to them and they want to sell the bloodshed, the propaganda, and the tyranny in front of your face. So, with that in mind, I want to take a moment to mention about this. So, there's a guy by the name of John Alpert, who originally was a reporter for NBC News. He's now a documentarian, but he was an NBC News reporter during the time of the Gulf War. That was the first Iraq War. That was the one where they got a little girl to go up in front of Congress and cry her heart out and say, there was babies being thrown out of incubators. We knew that was a lie. That was all a made up story. That was manufactured. That was actually the country that we were siding with, and they were just as evil as we were. And we knew that was all a big conspiracy to, again, propagandize, manipulate, and drive the aggression of hating Iraq so we can go into that war. And we're continuing to do that right now. I mean, think of all the stories that we've seen about Vladimir Putin. Right now, they're saying that Russia blew up their own pipeline to manufacture even more aggression, that somehow, they're cutting off the gas lines for Europe. That's criminal of Putin for something to do like that. But in results, it's actually the United States that blew up that pipeline, because why would Russia blow up its own pipeline? Why would Russia hurt a dominant feature of its economy, which is exporting natural gas? Why would they do that to themselves when Russia has the highest economy going right now? Why would they do that to themselves? It didn't make any sense. It's because it didn't make sense. It was a manufactured propaganda stunt to make us believe that the United States blowing up the pipeline to manufacture aggression against Russia was somehow Russia's fault. And here's John Alpert saying the similar thing that happened with the Gulf War when he was a reporter at NBC News. So take a listen to this.
Of broadcast on television, there's a it's in your Wikipedia, but there's a piece of your career that I'm interested in. Just this weekend, the New York Times released this report on civilian casualties in Iraq, basically, and how they've been wildly underreported, which we can kind of always assume, really, when it comes to war in other countries, be Iraq, Afghanistan, or Yemen. But in 1991, you had a situation where you actually had footage about civilian casualties in the first Gulf War, right? And you were let go. You were fired from NBC, I think it was, and then later it was supposed to air on CBS, and the people who wanted to air it on CBS were fired. Is that true?
So just think of that for a second. You're a journalist. You're a person that you're supposed to go out, record, gather information, and then bring it back to the network. And you get fired from that position for doing your job. Because John, you just heard there, he got fired for just having footage. Not for airing it or saying, he just had the footage available that he was going to bring back to the network and say, hey, I got some footage of the casualties, all the civilian casualties that were killing innocently in this ridiculous charade of a war. And he got fired from it. He got fired just for covering the footage, which is what a journalist is supposed to do. You're supposed to document what you're seeing. And if you're seeing innocent civilians die on the spot, you're going to cover it regardless. And he got fired from it. That goes to show you how dangerous the corporate media landscape is, and how there is no fact-based journalism when it comes to corporate media, because they're all based a part of agenda. They're all based on the lines of corporate oligarchy. They have agenda. They're politically aligned, and they're aligned with the military-industrial complex. Of course, they're not going to show you civilian casualties, because then people will realize, oh, maybe we shouldn't be doing this war. It'd be harder to sell people the idea of war if they realize that innocent children, mothers and daughters and sons and brothers and sisters are dying in vain because of it. Anyway, but here's his response.
Oh, unfortunately, that's sadly true. We had to defy the Iraqi restrictions. When we got to Iraq in the middle of the war, it was obvious that this was not the bloodless war that was being shown to us on American television. Back in those days, the generals would go on TV and they would show the cameras from the jet planes hitting bridges, and one of the reporters asked if there were any planes that missed the target. 100% accuracy. And they also asked them about civilian deaths and collateral damage. And our military claimed that this was a bloodless war.
And now they just have CIA officials being hired on as news analysts of these wars. Former CIA heads are now being hired by NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox News, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times. So it's not like they're just bringing on a general this time to just, spew out garbage. Now they're actually hiring them as a news analyst, as their go-to person. People that are saying how it's a bloodless war and how they don't really have accountability because they want to sell you the idea of war. It's a propaganda stunt that they're doing. Meanwhile, people with actual boots on the ground are seeing what's happening out in the open, and they get fired for it. They get fired for seeing exactly what is happening right in front of them.
And I don't know whether you guys have been to wars, but I've been to a lot of wars, and there's no such thing. And it's very, very important that the American people understand what happens when we apply our military power around the world. We have to know this because we're a big, strong, and potentially dangerous nation. And so in the middle of the war, I went to Iraq. And when you arrive in Iraq, you're presented with 3 pages of restrictions that you're supposed to follow. Can't turn your camera on without permission, can't turn it off without permission, it just went on and on. And instead of this single babysitter, we got 2 or 3 babysitters because they were really scared of me because they knew that I had had a lot of experience in war zones and I might trick them, and trick them we did. And within 2 or 3 days, we broke every single one of those restrictions. We filmed what was really going on. It was a war, and people were dying. And I snuck those tapes out of the country in my sock and brought them back to the United States. And NBC was very excited. And this was going to be the lead story on NBC News. And it was going to be the first real truth from the battlefield. And 2 hours before the broadcast, I was summoned into the office of the NBC president. And he said, "We're not going to show your tape, and you're never going to work here again," and fired me. And then I went.
And just note this. So, this is about the Gulf War. The Gulf War that happened in 1991. Who was owning NBC at the time? Right now it's Comcast. But in 1991, NBC was owned by General Electric. And General Electric was a huge contributor to the military supply. So, NBC got told by General Electric, by their partner, by their owners, by General Electric, to fire this man, to fire a journalist for doing his job, for getting coverage, for getting actual coverage of boots on the ground and seeing what's happening out in front of the blood and tyranny and the people dying in vain of an actual war, seeing what's up front and close on the battle lines, as he says right there. And he had to smuggle it into the country in his sock, and he gets fired for it because General Electric, that owns NBC, also owns news departments. They own the stories. They own and manufacture what they want the people to see and what they want to believe. That's how corrupted the mainstream media is. And that's how corporate media gets away with it, is because the owners, these big giant these big giant heads of corporations are able to manipulate and dominate what you're seeing, what you're believing, and what news stories they believe you should be concerned about the most. That's why they will tell you that Russian is a bad country and everyone in there is evil and Putin's the worst. Even though we've known for years that we've been aiding neo-Nazis in Ukraine to lead to this conclusion, to lead and escalate to the point where Russia was going to have to defend itself. We knew this for years, but they still want you to believe that Russia is at fault here. Why? Because we wanted to go to war with Russia for the longest time, and now we had an opportunity to do so. And mainstream media that's aligned itself to the military-industrial complex and giant corporations like Comcast, Disney, and military contractors that pay into it, they wanted to sell this war. So, of course, they're going to continue on the propagandization of all this. And you're never going to hear someone like this, someone with the gratitude of an actual journalist and the integrity of an actual journalist. You'll never see this on mainstream media. Never see this type of people. And here's also this too. This is from, I believe, 2008. And this is also what he said about the Gulf War. Take a listen.
I spent the first week of the war watching it on TV like everybody else. And I watched the news briefings where the generals came on TV every day, and they had their TV monitor behind them, and they played tapes of precision bombing, and the bridge would get hit and the tower would get hit. So I'm sitting at home, and, like if you're watching a baseball game and the umpire makes the wrong call, I mean, you jump up and I go, no, this was impossible, because I had been to enough wars by now to know that there is no such thing as the perfect war. There is no such thing as a bloodless war.
I'm now going to show you a picture of the luckiest man in Iraq on this particular day. Keep your eye on the crosshairs right there. Look at here. Right through the crosshairs. And now in his rearview mirror.
Look.
There were images from the other side. John Alpert was in Baghdad under the bombs.
Tell me, what happened to your father?
His leg broken, and his hand, and all face. No face. No, his lips and nose, everything. His eyes.
Most probably he was trying to hit this bridge.
Or you think he was trying to hit the bridge over here? But if they were trying to hit the bridge, they missed.
They missed it the second time.
Oh, yeah?
It was very difficult reporting from inside Iraq because not only was the United States government not telling the truth, but Saddam wasn't telling the truth either, and there was just a bizarre conspiracy with both of these sides trying to create the same false impression that the civilians weren't being hurt, that people weren't being killed.
Like I said, you'll never hear stuff like this on mainstream media. Why? Because it'll be harder to sell the war to people if people realize that there's innocent civilians that are dying. If they realize the actual heartbreak and bloodshed that people have suffered time and time again when evil oligarchs from across the world, but predominantly the United States, because we infiltrate the most of war, we're the ones that interrogate the most of the world. When people realize that and actually have emotional empathy for innocent people that are suffering, it's going to be a lot harder to get people on board with, bombing countries, and we got to get our military into, these unknown lands that you can't even point out on the map. It'd be harder for people to go along with the fact that we're still occupying a third of Syria. It'll be harder for people to understand that we're currently have troops in Somalia right now. Why? Why do we have troops in Somalia? Nobody has told us exactly why we're there, but we have to because of national security. And people fell along with it because they were sucked into the propaganda. They were sucked into the mindless propaganda of the war machine, coinciding with the corporate media that's just showing you all these images, showing all this hatred and fear-mongering and war-mongering to tell you and believe that these are evil, nefarious people, and we need to go after them because they're evil, nefarious regimes. But they're not telling you exactly why. They're not telling you why they're evil. They're not telling you exactly what's happening on the boots on the ground. And why is that? Because then you will realize that war is a sham. War is a ruckus. And it'd be a lot harder to sell people on the idea of war. Because war, like you said, there's no such thing as a perfect war. There's no such thing as a bloodless war. There's no such thing as a winnable war. There's no winners in war. There's people that have died and suffer in vain, and troops that suffer and die in vain, and then they come home and the survivors have PTSD or they commit suicide because they get even worse treatment back home after they serve their masters, their oligarchs, to kill and torture a bunch of people that they don't even know about. It is a disgrace, ladies and gentlemen. It is an utter goddamn disgrace. And they're never going to show actual journalists. That's why I turn to people like Aaron Mate and the Gray Zone and Mint Press News and independent journalists that actually have people on the ground and are actually willing to report what's on the ground. Because journalism doesn't take a special degree. I've realized this now. I've actually realized for a while, but I'm just saying it now. Journalism does not take a special degree. You don't have to be a Columbia PhD savant to become a journalist. All you need is courage, integrity, and an ability to communicate to another person exactly what you're witnessing. And be objective. Be critically objective to what you're witnessing. That's all it takes. Like, I'm doing this podcast show on a shoestring budget. I'm not a journalist. I'm just an ordinary Canadian. But somehow I'm able to have more integrity as a journalist than someone like Rachel Maddow or Anderson Cooper. Why? Because Anderson Cooper just gets told what to say and then just repeats it to you, the audience at home that's just watching it. I'm actually doing the research and thinking critically of what I'm witnessing. And realizing that all wars are a sham. Utterly, all wars are a sham. They are manufactured aggression to continue on the military-industrial complex, which we were warned in the 50s by a former general who became president. Dwight D. Eisenhower warned us in the 50s that this regime of military empires was going to form together. They were going to have an alliance of all these corrupted officials, these CEOs of contractors and suppliers, and the mainstream media was going to do destruction like this. And it's continuing to do so. Here's also this to point out too. I didn't even know about this happening. So Naomi Clark points out that this was the same month that John Weir and other activists stormed the CBS Evening News, among other news outlets, to disrupt Dan Rather and shout, "Fight AIDS, not Arabs," as Gulf War coverage began. I didn't even know about this. I didn't even know that there was protesters coming into the news networks to fight again to be the voice of anti-war, because all the mainline networks were just showing footage and images to make you more angry and more and build that aggression. But they didn't tell people, oh, by the way, we're killing innocent families that had nothing to do with this war. And she ties it to a video here, and take a look at this. This is interesting.
Hour and the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather. Watch.
Is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. We're going to take a break for a commercial just now. We'll break for a commercial. Thank you very much.
At the McNeil-Lehrer News Hour, one protester attempted to chain himself to anchor Robin McNeil. 4 protesters also tried to enter NBC studios during the evening newscast, but they were stopped. ACT UP, an AIDS activist group, is taking responsibility for the disruptions. A total of 14 people were arrested.
Now, how come we don't have that anymore? How come we don't have that anymore? The wars are still continuing to go on. We still have the military-industrial complex. We haven't solved and gotten to a diplomatic peace solution. Like, Ukraine is happening, Taiwan happening, we're occupying a third of Syria, we're still doing destruction all across the world. How come there's no anti-war activists that are willing to storm into news buildings anymore and do what they did in 1991? They stormed into the newsroom on a live broadcast and told the truth. Like, where's that action? Where's that motivation? Where's all the anti-war voices that we should be embracing right now? Like, it's insane. It's an utter disgrace that we don't have that anymore. And mainly because anti-war voices back in the day that were against Iraq all of a sudden are now preaching for war when it comes to Russia. That we got to manufacture aggression towards Russia because we got to protect the innocent lives of Ukrainians and the neo-Nazis that we've been funneling. The most corrupted empire in Eastern Europe. Like, it's insane. Where are the anti-war voices back in the heyday? Where's the people that grew up with Woodstock? There now it's okay to go along with the war because, oh, it's Putin. And Putin's somehow tied to Trump. So Trump being evil makes Putin evil, and that makes all of Russia evil. So we're doing a good thing, right? Maybe that's the mental gymnastics that they're doing right now. Instead of actually being principled and actually saying that wars are all bad and stop this nightmare, find a diplomatic solution, which is what we should have done. And we've been manufacturing wars ever since. We manufactured the Gulf War. We manufactured the Iraq War of 2002. We manufactured Afghanistan into the hellscape that is now. We manufactured Libya into a sex slave country that it is now. We manufactured the war in Syria. We manufactured the genocide in Yemen. We've done damage in Latin America. We've done damage all around the fucking world. And I'm just shocked. I'm utterly shocked that people back in the day that knew better just have lost it. They know better. They know that this is the same exact playbook. They know that the United States is manufacturing these wars all for business opportunities. They know it out in the open, but they're not admitting to it. They're not doing the same thing that they did like 20 years ago. Why is that? Why is that? It's insane. Literally insane that people have done a complete 180. And I miss seeing this. I didn't even know that this happened. Primarily because this is before I was born. But anyway, I didn't even know about stuff like this. And seeing that actually makes me a little upset that we're not seeing more of that on a daily basis. Where's the people storming in and saying enough is enough? That we're pledging all this money towards Ukraine, which is not helping anyone whatsoever. Why is no one storming in when the fact that the United States blew up the pipeline that's now going to allow European nations to freeze their ass off during the winter? on top of all the shortages that they're dealing with, on top of all the inflation, cost of living, and the oppression that ordinary people across the world are dealing with. Now they blew up a pipeline, so now they're guaranteed that they're not going to get gas to heat their homes. The United States did that, and where the hell are people standing up and fighting that? Why are people storming into MSNBC or CNN and calling it as it is? Where's the courage? Where's the integrity? Where are those people? Because I want to see a rebirthing of that. I want that to be rebooted. Of all the Hollywood reboots that they're making right now, like where's the reboot of that? The rebirthing of Woodstock, the rebirthing of anti-war voices that are telling it as it is and telling, you know, war manufacturers and the blood tyrannists to go fuck off. Where are those people? Because I really like to know. I'm one of those people. I'm one of those people. I don't want bloodshed. I don't want tyranny. I don't want war. Period. And I wish there was more people on that side. I really do.